G'day guys, this is Parrino. And you're watching Sticks and Strings. So we've just wrapped up on a show called All Together Now, which was it was 8 episodes of me actually judging other singers, which was something really different. I've usually been the one on the other side of the camera auditioning and nervously peeing my pants backstage and practicing my ass off, getting ready to audition and try to win some cash or get some exposure on one of these shows. But I was lucky enough to be one of the judges, asked to get up there and give a few words of wisdom and give some opinions, and that was probably one of the coolest experiences and one of those pinch yourself moments that you have that's a bit different from what I do day to day normally. So that's what I've just finished doing, and got a couple of new projects starting in 2019 as well that I'm excited about, as well as all my usual pub gigs and my show, which is Guitars Gently Weep, which is the Clapton and McCartney show. Well, I got into music through sort of a weird method. So I was getting into trouble a lot as a kid. I was getting into fights. I was, answering back to teachers. Just getting a detention every day and coming home, and my parents were not too happy. And we went to all sorts of different specialist doctors, and everyone basically suggested go on Ritalin. That's the Band-Aid cure for it. Take the drugs. And my parents were really against that because their logic was that it sort of numbs the bad feelings, but it numbs the good feelings as well. So it basically turns you into a zombie. And I think we might have tried it briefly, but they really didn't like the idea. So one doctor that they went to suggested that perhaps I was bored at school, and that's what was causing me to act up all the time, is not being challenged enough. And he was right, and sure enough we did some academic tests, and I was reading a little bit ahead of the class that I was in. I was in year 3, I was reading at a year 5 level. So what they did was I skipped year 4 completely and went from year 3 straight to year 5. So that meant all the work that I was doing was a lot more challenging. And immediately that made a difference in my behavior, because there wasn't really a chance to act up, because I had to concentrate and work so hard to keep up with the other kids. And also 1 year of growth in height and build when you're that age is quite substantial, so I wasn't really able to be a bully to kids that were a year taller and wider than me. But the other major suggestion that that doctor gave was taking up a musical instrument to get out some of that physical energy and get out some of the mental energy. I had some friends that were playing the drums, and I thought that's pretty cool. So I started with drum lessons with a guy called Simon Fishburne, who I'm still in touch with. He's an amazing session drummer in LA now. And that really started me on this sort of like obsessive practicing regime of, my dad used to call it effort equals results, which was like, okay, if I spend 2 hours a day on drums, I'm gonna get this much better. And all this stuff that I do in private is gonna result in this much growth and this much stuff that I can play when I'm with the school band or whatever. And I really like that idea that, it's like a scale. If you put in this much, then this much is gonna counterbalance from it. And I just started really obsessively practicing every single day and getting better, and to the point that all the guys that were playing drums when I started, I was now like overtaking them and becoming the leader in all the school bands and stuff. And our school band got to do some amazing stuff, like tour Hawaii and tour Adelaide, and have people like John Morrison and James Morrison come and jam with us. And it was I went to St. Pius, a really great music program. A guy called Jerry Plonner was the conductor. And so from drums into guitar, I think I found drums was a great physical outlet because you're bashing things and you're getting your stress out and you're hitting the beat, but obviously there's no melodic content to drums, it's all rhythm. So I was playing the drums and a bass player called Pat Taylor was the bass player in the band, and I would find myself just looking over at him all the time and watching his fingers on the bass. Oh man, that's cool. So we had an acoustic guitar in the house, so I took the top 2 strings off the acoustic guitar and turned it into a bass. And bass is just the bottom 4 strings of a guitar. So it's just started like that. So I went from drums to bass. And then after I got my parents to get me a bass, and that was my Christmas present that year. After a few years of bass playing, and then I found that a bit limiting, and I was thinking, I want to play some chords. The other thing at the time is there wasn't really any of the talent shows, and singing wasn't really that cool. So no one, I think that was in a school of like 600 kids. It was a boys' school. No one really wanted to sing. The choir was the singing, and that was nerdy. That was cool. So all the bands that I was in, we didn't really have anyone that was a quality lead singer, and I was certainly not a good singer at the time. I was really not naturally gifted in that area at all. Had to work hard at it, but it was like, oh, I might as well sing because no one else wants to. So yeah, I went from drums to bass to guitar and vocals, and once I found that combination, and okay, you can play, you can do the solos, you can play chords, you can sing, you can accompany yourself, and I guess my whole thing with the bad behavior must have been a lot of attention seeking. And when I realized that you can get attention in a positive way from music, from vocals, from writing songs, from performing in public, the very first time that I, played in public in front of people and felt that rush of a crowd reacting to you, that was like the biggest, most addictive high I could possibly imagine. And that's what, I know, 20-something years ago, and I've just been chasing that high ever since, really. So yeah, that's kind of what led me down the path that I've stayed on and have never really looked back. So when I was starting out, there was no internet. So we used to get these books of tabs. I got this in Italy, actually. I remember I was in a record store in Italy, and I was just starting guitar, and there was a nylon string guitar at my cousin's place, and I picked up this book. So this is an album that Metallica made with a symphony orchestra behind it. So it's basically greatest hits, but they've sort of reinvented some of the arrangements. So this was sort of my start in guitar. So some of the songs on there that I was doing, Call of Cthulhu. See if I can remember how to do any of these things. It's been a while. Call of Cthulhu is like... So that sort of thing. Obviously, like Nothing Else Matters, more of the fingerstyle thing. So there's those almost classical sounding pieces on there, which obviously lent themselves to the orchestral side of things. So this is Master of Puppets. So I think that was a good first music guitar education because it's covered such a wide spectrum. You had the finger style, you had the lead, you had the great rhythm playing of James Hetfield. So yeah, that was one of my bread and butters. The other one was an Australian band, Silverchair, and I could relate a lot to what these guys were doing because they were very similar age to me. Obviously, they were worldwide superstars. But yeah, just being that they were in a trio, I was in a trio. He was 17, I think, at the time, and I was 15. We were very similar ages, so I really idolized Daniel Johns and his songwriting and his guitar ability. And what I really loved was the way that they would evolve so much. So, Neon Ballroom was, I think, their third album, but they had Frog Stomp first, which was a grunge, heavy metal, very along the lines of Nirvana, which was the early 1994 grunge thing that had just come out of 92 and 93, which went to Freak Show, which is a bit more progressive, and then which went to this, which had more of the orchestral progressive influence, really long, strange songs and arrangements. And then from this they went to Diorama, which was on the almost like a Sgt. Pepper's Beatles album with Van Dyke Parks arranging orchestras and a musical theatre sort of a vibe. So I loved the way that musically, like almost like a Queen, they would never try to fit into a box. Each album would be different, and even within each album, each song would be different and telling a story. So that was sort of two of my big influences on guitar and singing. So guitar-wise, I tend to gravitate more towards double humbucker guitars. As you can see, most of my guitars have the basic setup of humbucker here and humbucker here. So there's a few reasons for that. One is simplicity and the style of music. I'm normally playing rock music, which sounds good with the humbuckers. I also really like simple switching setups. You can see that this guitar's just got two knobs, volume and tone, and a switch that switches from that pickup to both pickups to just that pickup. The reason for that is, unlike your typical guitarist in the band, I'm usually singing at the same time. So what I want to have to do is think as little as possible. So I can just focus on singing, playing. If I want to switch the sound, I can do it without looking and can change my sound. When you get to the Gibson style, which is the four knobs and a volume for each pickup, now I have to think about, if I'm switching, which pickup am I on, which volume knob is going to affect that pickup. So there's an extra bit of thought in there. No, I do love this guitar, and I do love the SG as well. I mean, these are my two Gibson babies, but they do both have that system which, occasionally I am just playing guitar on a gig and not singing, and I'll pick those up and they sound awesome. But yeah, so this is my Music Man Silhouette, which is sort of somewhere in between, I guess, a Strat and a Les Paul. It's a bit of a hybrid sort of a thing, similar to something like John Petrucci might use from Dream Theater. So yeah, pickup wise, you can see most of my guitars double humbucker, double humbucker, double humbucker. This is a Strat that I've turned into a double humbucker by putting mini humbuckers in it. These are two of my favourite guitars. These are James Tressart guitars, which are completely made of steel. Which is he's got Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine and Audio Slave uses one of these, and the guys from Metallica, and I think he made one for Clapton and Bob Dylan and Rolling Stones, ZZ Top. So these pickups sound amazing. These guitars are amazing. But yeah, recently, just through my relationship with Ernie Ball Strings, I've developed a relationship with Music Man Guitars, which is the same parent company, Ernie Ball and Music Man. So that led me down the road to having an endorsement with Music Man, which is freaking amazing. And I've got these two beautiful toys. So these are both from the BFR range, which means Ball Family Reserve, which is sort of like their equivalent of like a private stock or like a exclusive elite options that of their regular guitars. So this one's called a Gold Roller, which is their Silhouette model, and this one's called a Cutlass, which is their Strat model. And what's great about this compared to your regular Strat is this noiseless system that they've come up with. And what it does is, if I can explain this correctly, when you have a hum in a guitar, it's an out of phase frequency. And so what this system does is injects the opposite frequency into the guitar to sort of cancel it out. So you got one phase going one way, they'll send the opposite phase going the other way, and then you cancel out that hum. So it's a noiseless pickup system, which is, you know, one of the frustrating things about a regular Strat can be the noise you get from the pickup, so you don't get that with this. And what was really cool about this guitar is they only made 31 of these particular guitars. If you look at that, the back of that neck, it's a very nice flamed maple thing. I don't know much about woods, but it's cool. Yeah, so they only made 31 of these guitars in the entire world, and this is number 1 of 31. It's the very first one. So I was pretty lucky to get my hands on it. And the guys at Music Man were very excited to open the box and realize that it was number 1, because they didn't know, but you get a little certificate that tells you which one of 31 it is, and it was number 1. So it's a very rare beast. One of my first endorsements was with a company called Boss, and that came about through Australia's Got Talent, which I did almost 10 years ago now, 2009. I went on there and I didn't have a loop pedal at the time, and I wanted to do a live looping thing where I hit the guitar and created a drum beat that would repeat. So the Boss head office is actually just in DY, not far from here, which was very convenient. And I told them what I wanted to do, and they were immediately very welcoming to me and let me come down to the warehouse and try some stuff out. I ended up using the RC50 loop pedal, which is not available anymore, has been replaced by this thing, which is called the RC300, which I still use to this day for my gigs. And they were awesome, and through the relationship with Boss, as a result of that, you know, they've taken me to Queensland to perform at AMAC, which is a Australian music something convention up there. They've taken me to 2 Melbourne guitar shows where I've gotten to mingle and perform next to, you know, people like Alex Hutchings, who's a freak fusion guitarist with Steven Wilson, and Ian Moss and Brett Garsett, and just every crazy, you know, Diesel. The guy from Genesis, Steve Hackett, that was another one of those pinch yourself moments. And so I'm very grateful to have this awesome relationship with Boss that, you know, when I need some gear, they help me out. And when they need me to fly across the country and perform for them, the phone rings, I say yes. And also did some video demos for them of all 7 of their loop pedals that they make. They make 7 different sizes and varieties. And they had me come into their studio and record a few of my original pieces to demonstrate what their loopers could do. So that was another really cool experience. And so as far as playing live, I used that for my solo acoustic gigs. And I use this thing's called a GT100. I use this for my band gigs. It's basically a multi-effects. You can set it up to either do patches, and which is like where one pedal activates many pedals, but I prefer the setup of where each button is its own pedal. So it's basically I'm using it as if I had a bunch of stomp boxes there. So, you know, if I turn the first one on, it activates a compressor. If I turn the second one on, it activates the overdrive. And the third one on, puts the delay on. So they each serve their own purpose. So that's my live setup, and my daily practice routine uses this sort of miniaturized version, which is a GP10, which you can just, you know, plug your headphones in if you don't want to piss off the neighbors so much. You can plug a backing track into it. Most of my practice is done with some backing tracks that I play along to that go through all the various keys. I like to obviously be like pretty time efficient with the practice and get as much done in as little time as possible, or as much productive practice done in as little time as possible. So everything I do is usually in all 12 keys, just to really be thorough, and always try to iron out any weak spots in my playing and my music theory knowledge. Some of the coolest experiences that I've had have been at this Thursday night gig that I do at O'Malley's, which is just your typical pub gig, but as they say, treat every gig like you're playing at a stadium. So what happened one night was we arrived and the manager said, "Oh, do you know Hell Yeah is in town?" And Hell Yeah is a band consisting of the singer from a band called Mudvayne and the drummer from a band called Pantera. I said, "Yeah, of course I know that." He said, "Oh, well, they're staying at the Holiday Inn around the corner, and they heard that there's a good rock and roll live music here," because I'd been trying to build up this thing called Raw Rock Thursdays, which is just stripped back acoustic versions of rock songs. And when they were asking around where to go see live music, that had come up to their attention that there was this rock night just around the corner. And so I roll my eyes and I'm like, yeah, Vinnie Paul's gonna come down to O'Malley's. Yeah, sure, I'll hold my breath. And we're doing our set, and sure enough, in walks this big biker dude, Vinnie Paul, with his entourage, with I think his name's Chad from Mudvayne, the lead singer, and just on stage playing some tune and start, oh my god, playing to Vinnie Paul from Pantera now. So that was pretty amazing, and then we got to chatting with them in the break, and they were enjoying a beverage or two, as you do, and then he said, "Do you guys want to have a jam?" And they were up for a jam, so spent the next 2 hours drinking and jamming with the guys from Pantera and Mudvayne, and they had so much fun that they came back again the following night. So that was probably the coolest, craziest, most unexpected thing that's ever happened, music wise and celebrity wise. And earlier this year or last year, Vinnie passed away, so was really devastated to hear that. And it's one of those things I can tick off the bucket list, that I got to have a jam with Vinnie before he left. So yeah, we'll miss him, and I hope he's up there jamming with his brother now. I mentioned before, so I'm going to be judging in a band competition called Northern Composure, and I'll be judging with Kirk from In Excess and Kelly from High Five. And they asked me to come and speak to these teenagers and give them some advice about starting a career in music and performance, and things you can do to get better and to self-market and self-promote. My big advice was to practice really hard. Like, that's always my advice to even the contestants on the TV show was, don't practice till you get it right, practice till you can't get it wrong, which I think people build up their performance and they think, oh yeah, I've got this nailed, and then they get out on stage and it goes horribly wrong and they choke and they mess up. So I think you need to always be over-prepared. When you think you've got it nailed, do it another 50 times, get it into your muscle memory, so that when you get out there, you don't have to think about the song, you can think about, looking at the crowd and enjoying yourself, and a bit of performance, a bit of movement, a bit of stage presence and choreography and showmanship. Those are the things that are going to be the difference between a good performance and a great performance. When the music is embedded in you and can just sort of come out naturally and you don't have to think about it. So yeah, my advice has always been just putting in the hours, practice, working hard, and then letting that show and letting that come out. They say practice makes perfect, but it's about how you're practicing. So if you're practicing bad habits, you're going to embed those habits. So he said perfect practice makes perfect. You need to practice the right things So I think that's really important as well. Well, the rock and roll scene in Australia is interesting at the moment. There is a great respect and revival of a lot of the 80s bands that were, big at the time, big in the golden era of live music. And it's, great to see people like the Screaming Jets and the Choir Boys and the Radiators and Dragon still able to tour and fill up venues, and your Jimmy Barneses and your John Farnhams. As far as what's coming up that's new, it is a little bit of a drought at the moment. We are relying on the TV talent shows to come up with our next big thing, but there's also great bands such as the Living End and Birds of Tokyo, and a lot of young bands on Triple J, Sticky Fingers, things like that are making a name for themselves and cutting through. But it's just harder these days. I think every single day on Spotify, somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 songs are released every day. So how do you cut through that and set yourself apart? It's hard. Everyone's a bedroom rock star these days, or everyone can be. So it's really about being unique, having something to say, developing your social media connection with your fans, and being able to cut through all the thousands and thousands of songs that are being released every single day. Well, social media for me has been a big part of developing some of my endorsements and contacts in the music industry, as well as building up a pretty decent following and engagement with some of the lessons that I've been posting. So there's a lot of online guitar groups with hundreds of thousands of members, and you can use these groups to post your content. But again, it's a matter of cutting through. If 100 people are posting a video every day, how are you going to get yours to get clicked on? And people will just gladly scroll through their news feed and ignore things. So what's going to make someone look at you and spend 2 minutes of their day watching your video? So what I started doing was putting a whiteboard behind me with tabs, because I found that if I posted a video where I was just showing off, I would get X number of reactions and engagements. If I posted a video where I was showing off and then explaining how I was showing off, what I was doing, what scale are you using, slow the lick down after you play it, I would get X number of engagements, and people tag their friends, and people following my page and wanting more. And if they go home and spend 10 minutes learning what you just showed them, and they get something out of it, all of a sudden they feel this connection to you. This is this guy that taught me that thing that's made me a little bit better. That's a great feeling for me, being able to help someone on the other side of the world.